Today they're predicting some big rain in the afternoon, and so what I wanted to do is try to plan out a day that I could hopefully get some indoor work done. I have several little indoor projects to take care of, and we can hopefully get those little parts installed on the fairing and see if we're going to like them. Now, the clear on Glenn's fairing looks like it's drying up perfectly here. We just have to unmask that and get time later in the day. But the big thing is going to be to get the parts polished and fit in this little area. I'm going to have to take the fairings off to do that, of course. But since we got a nice little ride on the RD yesterday, it won't matter today. I'm very enthusiastic to get this done. I really would like to see how that's going to look before we do the photo shoot. Now, it seems like every day that goes by we're planning something around the weather this time of year, of course. Flowers are coming out, and Karen has some obligations we have for doing yard work, but I always get to spend a couple hours every day working on motorcycles, or riding, or both. I love the sound waking up in the morning and they're already mowing grass in the neighborhood. The fish are eating, the birds are chirping, and it's time to work on motorcycles. Listen to those lawn mowers going. Look at that wisteria. Wow. I'm ready. Except it's going to rain later today. It is definitely going to rain. I feel it in the air. And today they're eating off the ground. They boycotted my feeder. So there's only a few items left on our little projects table, but we want to start off by getting these 2500 sanded and buffed out. Now, when working on this part, and I want to sand it, since it's thin, this is 025 aluminum, I don't want to take a chance I'm going to put a curve in it or a bend or a kink. So the best thing, and I've really got a lot of clear on here, the best thing is to put something for a backer. In fact, this is a piece of aluminum. It's just a piece of 1/4 inch aluminum, 3/8 aluminum. What I used to do the FLITZ polishing demo, and you can look for that on the old channel, back on the channel, back in the USSR. So little soapy water, some 2500 grit. This should go relatively quickly. Now I'm going to do this by hand and see if this paint comes right up quickly, which it should. But usually I would always wait the extra day. And it's just, I'm old school, and to me it always seems like it buffs out easier if you let it dry a little longer. This is 24 hours. I'm not sure it's going to be that easy to buff out. Maybe I will have to use the machine. I don't know. But we'll give it the old-fashioned try anyway. Then the plan is to run out, pull that fairing off the bike, and figure out how we're going to install this. I decided to use, at least right now, some 5-minute epoxy, which would mean I could heat it with a hairdryer if I want to take this off at some future time without too much drama. If I use JB Weld, it'll be a little bit more difficult. Let me just see if this paint is coming up. Yeah, it's flattening right out. I wanted to do this in real time, of course. Let me make this so you're not seeing the water on it. Always like to do the demo. It's still wet. Anyway, you can see it flattened right out. Once I get the whole part flattened out, we'll see how it buffs out. Okay, so that's completely sanded flat. Let me just get what that looks like here. And this is the product that we've been having such really good success with. And I always say this is, I think it's my favorite, but it's probably a tie with the Meguiar's product. But since I have this, this is the one we're going to use today. But I have used the Meguiar's and it's good too. And Glenn had that, I don't remember the name of it, but it's on a previous video. Maybe we'll recycle that at some time when we're doing some, we're running short of material here. But anyway, this is good stuff, and I think this works on, I actually did the hood of the car one day with this, just to see how it worked. I had the buffer out. It worked great on a car. So what I always try to do as part of my videos is do the first part of it in real time with no camera cuts. I want to see how that's going to come up. And from having a lifetime of buffing out model airplanes that were very, very delicate, this piece of material is delicate too. So you can't treat it like it's a car fender. And I want to just see, now this paint is not as old as, this is really for my information as well as putting on the video. This paint is really only 1 day old. Normally I would let it dry the second day. I always have felt that made it easier, and the results speak for themselves. I always like to let paint dry in between coats and outgas, which we really didn't do with this, and I don't know what the trade-offs are. But I know when you're running a body shop or a real professional thing, you want to get the parts in and get them out and everything as quick as possible. Now I know a lot of my modeling friends will be looking at this and saying, wow, I could do that to a model plane. That would be great. And you know what? You can. But the problem is the paint that we use in motorcycling is relatively heavy, and you've got to put it on a lot thinner. I would say with almost guaranteed with an airbrush, but it can be done. I know people have done it. I've done it. Okay, so just so we don't make this too boring. I know it's boring already. And again, if you have a brand new microfiber or a clean one that you haven't used to clean your sewers with or anything. Wanted to show it no camera cuts. Let's see if I can show it. I don't know. Always difficult to show. We started with the sanding, the 2500. And that's by hand without a buffer. If you can do that by hand, there's almost no reason to use a buffer unless you're like me, you're real lazy. Anyway, that looks pretty good. I think that's going to work out pretty good. So let me get these done and we'll get ready to go strip the parts off the bike, pull those fairing parts off. So with the two parts buffed out and ready, next step is going to be to pull this fairing side, something we've done quite a few times already. In fact, I'm actually getting sick of pulling these fairings off, But anyway, they do come off. It's just a matter, it's a labor of love thing. Now, one of the things I have to take into account here, this bracket is adjustable in and out. This one isn't. This is a solid mount. So if I have to, I can shim this because I want to make sure I don't have any interference here, and it doesn't look like I do. But I don't want to take a chance that I do. I don't want to make a problem for myself if I don't have a problem. So that's the first consideration. I do have some variation. I can move this back and forth. So when I put this back together, I want to be real careful I don't pinch or bend, and it looks like that's, with my clumsy fingers, it feels okay. I don't have something I can put in there. Well, there we go. Just as an example, this piece would add the thickness. Actually, it's right here that there'd be an interference if there was one right here. So shimming this out and moving this bracket out will probably be before I even put this on, because I don't want it rubbing on there and pressing if possible. Now, what's always amazing to me is whatever you do in life, you do it the first time, it takes 6 hours. The second time you do it, it takes 4 hours. The third time, it takes 1 hour. You get good at things right away, especially when they're painful. Now, I guess that's just evolution. I know in the beginning when I bought the R1 and I was taking a fairing on and off, it goes on and off with snaps, and these little Zeus snaps. I was getting so good at it, I could take the fairing on and off. I could be asleep and be taking it on and off. Anyway, I wanted to mention one thing. One thing that makes this job a little bit nicer than it normally would be, these little nuts that have the washer built as he drops them. The washer is built right into the back and it bites into the fiberglass. So these really make it a lot easier. So what I decided to do is take one side off at a time, just to see if I'm going to have to make any clearance issues here or shim anything, which looks like I am. And we'll figure it all out, that's for sure, but we're getting relatively good at pulling this bike apart. So it looks like the only interference is the bottom of this little piece here. It's got a little lump. I'm just going to grind that flat be one less thing to deal with when I don't want to shim it out unnecessarily. And I want to have some clearance there. That's the whole idea. All right, just a little rough edge is gone now, and I polished it up. That should be fine. Like a lot of parts, almost every part of this restoration, because this part has been damaged, repaired, this surface that we're going to mount this to is not exactly flat. So I'm going to try to actually get it a little bit flatter than it really is. Before I even go any further, I want to dress off this area with a sanding block and get some of this material roughened up, just so the glue gets a better bite. I want to be an exact, like a fit where you need to put a gasket, but I just want to make it as reasonable as I can. Again, a lot of this is just repaired material. That's the problem. So the material we're going to use is Brodak 5-minute quick cure. This is a good quality epoxy, and it's always fresh because he's got a big turnover. And that's available from Brodak.com. Cures in 5 minutes. So the first thing we're going to try to do is mix up a little epoxy. Very carefully make a little bead here, not too much. Put the part on. I want to try to simulate this. Line up the stripe, and then I have to hold it in position, basically for 5 minutes. Now I may as well put something good on television, because we're going to be watching this 4 or 5 times. I'm going to have to babysit this at various times. I'll explain why as soon as I get this part tacked in place. But the first step is to get this tacked in place. So one advantage of using this material is it has a low enough melting point that what's going to happen is, if I decide I want to take these off for whatever reason, and again, that's always one of my goals, never make these things permanent in some way if you don't have to. Now I'm kind of just going to let this half cure here, so I don't have to hold it quite as long, because this is just going to tack it in position anyway. And the most important thing is to get it held right in exact position so that that stripe lines up as accurately as possible. That is absolutely the most important thing right now. Again, whenever you have 5-minute epoxy, even if it's Lowe's store-bought or whatever, it has a shelf life. And what can happen is the resin, not the hardener, the resin can crystallize. All epoxy wants to crystallize, of course. So what happens is, if that happens, take the whole tube and heat it with a hairdryer, and it'll go right back to being a liquid. So I'm going to put this on. This again, I have a little container with denatured alcohol here, and the purpose of that is if any of this gets out onto the part, and of course that's always a possibility, but I don't need to put a big giant amount on this right now. So you would think, if it's my lucky day here, I can line that up. Now I can flip it over. Holy mackerel, that came out pretty. Now I still can move it. Oh, as he says it, I move it just a little bit. I can get it right in position. And basically now I just got to babysit it and wipe off any of the extra alcohol with a Q-tip, the extra epoxy Q-tip and alcohol. There we go. Just got to babysit it. So what I'm doing, I'm making a little reinforcement out of this, putting some 5-minute epoxy on it, and then jamming it into the seam in there. And I've already got this side done, and I'll just stiffen it up just a little bit anyway. But again, the beautiful part here is a hairdryer will loosen that right up. We can pull it right off if we have to. What I thought would be helpful to do is to do one of these in real time. And I cut a little strip of that reinforcing tape, which of course you can buy in any marine supply, any boat supply. And it's very handy to have. Modeling stores even have it. It's really just e-glass. So what I thought would be good information to pass on here, I change my gloves regularly because what happens, you get a little drop of epoxy somewhere and you wind up picking up the part, or you wind up doing other things that contaminate the part, and then you've got to spend a half an hour buffing it off. Now the epoxy will stay soft. It'll dry, but not dry for 24 hours or so. So what happens, you can get it off almost always with isopropyl alcohol, and I have a big tube of isopropyl alcohol here, just because I do screw things up once in a while. Always good to have it. It's like a pencil eraser. So here you have, and this was my little I guess show and tell thing. Now you have this little piece of material. Just dip it right in there, and don't have to be cute about it. You got 5 minutes to get it on. Get it all dabbed in and whatever. Now it's good and soaked. Now I can take it out. Lay it up right up by the crease here. Put it up under the thing, and now I want to shove it in there as much as I can. Shove that in there as much as I can. Keep pushing it in so it makes like a little joint. Once I get it stuffed in there, I can take a little screwdriver, something like this. It doesn't have to be fancy. This is one of the things, does not have to be pretty or fancy. It's just got to work. And then, of course, turn the part over. Make sure the other side of the part, you haven't dripped some epoxy and it's dripping down the side of the part. That's always, as you're babysitting this for 5-10 minutes even, that's always a good idea. Now, whatever, that's in there pretty good now. Now, whatever epoxy's left over, I can take up with the screwdriver and just get it to go in there. And you always wind up picking up a thread here. It's always annoying when you pick up a thread like that, but nothing you can do about it. So once you've seen one of these in real time, I'm assuming, and of course if you want to make it pretty, that's not going to hurt anything at all. The main thing is to make it strong. You always, whenever you engineer up a part like this, make it structurally sound first and then make it cosmetically pretty. When you try to make it pretty first and structural sound second, the results are usually pretty predictable. So that's going to go right in there. Now I just have to flip it once this starts to cure. And I think that'll be just perfect. And then of course babysit it for a good 5 minutes. Now the whole thing is, while this part, the epoxy's already cured out, at least temporarily, put a little bit of that polish on, the 4CR, and any little fingerprints or epoxy that still remain on this. Trying to be so careful not to get any scars or stains or anything on it. But one of the things I did in the course of this restoration, I put plenty of clear on just in case I had to do more these unnecessary repairs, like dropping the bike or whatever. Anyway, I think this is going to be a nice little addition. It's basically a free thing, except for the little sheet of aluminum, a couple of bucks for that. But other than that, a couple of days of this, I think it's going to add something that, and when I put it back together, we'll find out for sure. And as I keep taking this bike apart and putting it back together, unfortunately, I'm getting better than I need to be. Oh yeah, I'm guessing that that's fine. Now I know some of these videos get a little lengthy, a little long, and I can be long-winded too with all my stories, but the bottom line is, a lot of things you have to see in real life without camera cuts. And I was so disappointed sometimes when I watch a YouTube video. People have good intentions, but they get right to the part that I want to see how they cut that or glued it or enforced it, and they just go to the next step. And I try not to do that. I know how successful I am. That's in the opinion, your opinion actually. But I think once this is assembled back on the bike, that's going to be a tremendous difference. I'm going to celebrate with the wife with an extra cup of delicious coffee. Oh boy. And then once that epoxy's, it'll be fully cured in 15-20 minutes. I can go reassemble that side of the bike. Are you guys hungry today? Is there a chance you want to take a break? Hey, we still have one side of the bike to do, so have a snack, we'll get back to work. Well, one thing good about taking this bike apart over and over and over again, I can skip my day at the gym today. I don't have to do any sit-ups or pull-ups or flop-ups or anything. Anyway, it goes together. I got to pull the other side off. The other side will basically be similar, if not exactly the same. Everything bolted right up, and that part has plenty of clearance. It worked out pretty good so far, but the day's not over. Okay, so all the clearance issues worked out just the way, perfectly, exactly. So now I know the other side, which had more clearance to begin with, will be no problem with clearance. And I know when you do pictures of this, because what happens as you change the angle, this all moves around. Having that little piece, that'll just make a nicer presentation, I think. Actually, from the front angle is where you see it even more. Anyway, all in the eye of the beholder anyway. Now, what worked out great, I didn't even have to shim anything, and I always keep this bucket of little shims and little rubber washers and things when I don't know what I'm going to need. A lot of times it's right in there. Now, even though this side should go quicker, and in essence that's always the case when you have two things, but I don't want to rush it. I don't want to try to save some time and compromise this. I'm going to basically do exactly what I did to the other part. I like the way the look is, and I think it'll be, just add one more little detail to this part, and I just always thinking about that. And when I laid out that stripe, I never could figure out how to make the bars that I didn't have that going through there. And see, it was a problem even on the original concept sketch. I always had to look at that corner of the motor mount, but never thinking this would be one of the solutions, and it looks like this is going to work okay. Well, the second side really did go a lot quicker. But that's the case with everything. There's almost no exceptions to that. If you mix a pail of concrete, the second one you mix usually goes a little faster. You figure out all the little tricks along the way. And that's why professional people usually get things done a lot quicker than amateurs like myself. Okay, we're ready to put that back on. This should go quickly too. And the rain has actually stopped. We may even get to take some pictures today. And it just can't be a lot more fun than this. This is about as fun as it gets. We are good to go here. It's a good feeling. Now, because it stopped raining, I'm going to be able to get out there and shoot a few pictures just so I can look at this like a before and after. So here we are. It's in the eye of the beholder, of course, but I think that looks better than having that. I always thought it looked like somebody with a tooth missing. I don't know, Michael Strahan or something. Anyway, as I look around, we're ready for another test ride, except it's looking like rain any minute now. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.